Welcome to Inside the Concert from 92Y School of Music. I'm Naomi Lewin, former afternoon host on WQXR and host of the weekly radio feature and podcast Classics for Kids. And if you can hear it, I live where there are a lot of sirens. Inside the Concert goes deeper into some of the repertoire from this year's 92Y Marshall Weinberg classical music season. On Tuesday, May 11th at 7:30 p.m. Eastern Time, clarinetist Anthony McGill will perform in Kaufman Hall, not with his band, the New York Philharmonic, where he's principal clarinet, but with two other extraordinary musicians, soprano Susanna Phillips and pianist Myra Huang. That's part of 92Y's Almost Home series, so you can attend the concert online or in person. There's a link for tickets at 92y.org and on the YouTube page. The program on May 11th includes two pieces by Franz Schubert, the Arpeggione Sonata, which was written for an instrument that doesn't exist anymore, so clarinetists and any other number of other instrumentalists are entitled to help themselves to it, and the Shepherd on the Rock for soprano, clarinet, and piano. There will also be the world premiere of a piece for soprano, clarinet, and piano commissioned by 92Y, Chava's Daughters Speak by James Lee III. When I started preparing for this event, I was amazed to realize that I have known Anthony McGill for over 20 years, since he became associate principal clarinet of the Cincinnati Symphony, which was right after he graduated from the Curtis Institute of Music. I was the midday announcer for Cincinnati's classical radio station WGUC back then. I remember a dark and stormy night when Anthony, his mother, James Levine's mother, Helen, who lived in Cincinnati, and I all started out for Helen's favorite restaurant about 15 miles up the highway. The weather was so horrendous that Anthony, who was at the wheel of the car, wisely suggested that we might find dinner closer to home and live to tell the tale. And we did. And so Anthony and I are both here with you today. Anthony is a big fan of the composer James Lee III, and so am I after listening to his music this week. Anthony has been premiering James Lee III's work left, right, and center, mostly left, I sort of imagine. And tonight he will talk about Lee's music and point out some things to listen for in it, and he will answer your questions, so please put them into chat. Anthony, it is so great to have you here for Inside the Concert.
Thanks so much, Naomi. Great to see you and great to
be
nice
with you. So first up, Schubert. You must have played Shepherd on the Rock a zillion times. It's a piece that Schubert wrote for a soprano friend to strut her stuff. How is it for the clarinetist to play?
It really is one of the greatest pieces that we play, actually. It's one of these perfect works, I think. It's so short that you're like, it ends and you're like, oh, if I could only hear more, you know? So it's just awesome.
You get to play sustained and you get to play it covers all the bases for you and for all the instruments and the singer.
Yeah, the textures, the colors that he writes with for both all of the instruments, actually. It's, and the clarinet being the soprano clarinet is something that, we take pride in. We get to sing in that register that sounds, and we get to kind of meld our sounds together with the soprano. It's just a joy to play as well as to listen to.
And she's a great soprano to meld with.
Oh my gosh. So part of the reason I got the idea to do this program is that we did the Shepherd on the Rock in Washington, D.C. Quite a few years ago now. But I wanted to bring this particular band back together, actually.
A great band, yeah. You three, some of my favorite musicians in the entire world. So I can't wait to go to this concert. Did you want the 92Y commission for this concert to be a companion piece to Shepherd on the Rock?
Yeah, I mean, the idea came when we were discussing after one of my last appearances there in the fall or winter. And, we were talking about different ideas, and this idea just popped into my head to kind of pair some new work with the Schubert on the Rock. And so that's how this came about. And as we'll talk about some more, James is he's a prolific composer, and he works very efficiently. And he basically just, I asked him if he'd do it. We asked him if he'd do it. He said yes. And then, a month later, or some very short period of time for a composer, this great piece appears, and it's fantastic.
And you're the one who suggested him for the.
Yeah, for sure.
Tell us a bit about James Lee III.
Yeah, so
his music.
Sure. Yeah, he wrote to me maybe 4 years ago or so. And I had been teaching at Peabody Conservatory quite a few years ago now. And he was in the Maryland area, I believe, and maybe still is.
Yeah, he's in the Baltimore area, same as Peabody, right?
Yeah, he's at Morgan State University, and he wrote me and just introduced himself, just cold, like, "Hi, I'm James Lee III. This is some of my music. It would be great to work together." And, I looked him up. I heard his music. I was like, "Well, your music sounds great. It would be nice to do something, if possible." And so we left it at that. And, over the years, he got in touch again, and he was like, "There's this concerto that I wrote for wind ensemble." So I've been listening to his music. I've kind of known his music. I've wanted to work with him for so long. And then I just started searching last year for some clarinet and piano works, because, I wasn't playing with the orchestra anymore. So the prospect of a concerto was kind of put on hold. So that's when I discovered his a piece called Anew that he wrote that was just gorgeous. And then I was kind of hooked on his music, because, the way he writes for clarinet is just so wonderful. And I started playing his music. He started writing more music. I started playing his music more. He wrote more music. I discovered that he wrote a clarinet quintet that he wanted performed, and we premiered that just recently. That hadn't been really premiered before. And it was just like, and I had the time now to do so much of that, because I wasn't playing with the orchestra as much. And it's just been a really nice relationship to, like, really just blossom in the time when music wasn't really happening as much.
Well, good for him for reaching out like that. More composers should sort of just say, "Hey, if you like this, there's more where that came from."
Yeah, totally.
So his new piece that you're about to premiere, Chava's Daughters Speak, involves three people. And you're still putting that together. So unfortunately, we're not going to get to hear any of that this evening, but we do have video of you performing some of his other music, including Anew. But first I wanted to have people hear you play his solo clarinet piece. Solo.
Yeah.
And this is a piece that he wrote for you, Principal Brothers number 3. How did that come about?
Yeah, so last year, there been so many great collaborations online, and one of them was a Lift Every Voice and Sing collaboration with a lot of Black principal players in the country and others and the colleagues. A beautiful production that Titus Underwood, principal oboist of Nashville Symphony, put together. And he saw that, and he saw my brother, and he knows we kind of know each other, and he wrote all of these great solo works for 4 of us, and my brother Titus, and Andrew Brady, I believe, from Atlanta, principal bassoon of Atlanta Symphony, and he wrote these pieces that have, like, kind of our names and our initials in them, and once again he rattled this off so quickly, and it's like great. These are great works, and so I really, really love the work. It's very colorful and it's just fantastic. And it just feels very special because it was written at a very kind of challenging time for everyone in our country last summer. And to have this gift in the middle of it, it was wonderful.
That is great. And I think he said for yours, especially, he was inspired by Stravinsky's three pieces for clarinet. Is that a piece you played?
Yeah, I've played that piece a lot. It's one of the standards for clarinet, a classic solo clarinet piece. There aren't so many pieces that we play for solo clarinet, and that's one of the biggest one. To add to that repertoire is amazing, and it will get played. Like I've already played and performed and recorded this piece numerous times since just a few months ago. So it's really nice. Yeah.
Well, let's hear, this is a piece that's in three sections, but since we don't have time for all of it, I chose the middle section. So we're going to hear the middle section of Principal Brothers No. 3, featuring Anthony McGill. I chose that section partially for the wonderful sound effect noises at the end, but also because I love how the clarinet is sort of having a conversation with itself with that wonderful rich lower, the chalumeau register versus how do you make that conversation happen other than being a genius clarinet player?
It's really hard. Yeah, it's not easy. All of the jumps and the skips from low register to high register, it's really tricky. But like you mentioned, that's what makes it very interesting. You have to deal with that as a single line player, without being able to do double stops and all of these other things. How can you use the rhythm and the register to make it sound like multiple instruments, to give it like texture when you're playing it? And that's what makes it fun and exciting to play and challenging, but also interesting to the listener.
It's super cool. I saw that James Lee wrote that there were elements of improvisation in the piece. How did he incorporate that in there?
Well, I think I'm curious what he means by that. It's probably that there are those kind of glisses and turns and shifts of sound that you hear a little bit that allow the player to kind of bend the sound in it. Also, when you're doing it, when you're writing a solo piece and performing a solo piece, a lot of the pacing of the work is kind of based on the composer. He like gives he gives the, I mean, the performer. He gives the performer like the leeway to be able to shape the piece however you want. So it's almost like you're making it up as you're reading the notes that the composer wanted. So that has the feel of the freedom because there isn't an accompaniment or a duo line, you know, with you as an ensemble. You can kind of improvise on the tempo and the pacing, if you will. So that's probably what he was talking about. And I love it. It has the ability for that capacity for a freedom.
You mentioned that he writes well for the clarinet. He himself is a pianist. And it's funny, last week on Inside the Concert, Brandon Patrick George and I were talking about Schubert and the fact that he was a violinist, so he didn't always get how to write for the flute. So I wondered whether James Lee III consulted with you about writing for the clarinet, and if there was ever anything that didn't quite work, could you say, can you fix this? Can you change it?
You know, what's interesting about this relationship in particular is that we haven't had so many discussions about anything regarding changing anything. You know, there are questions about, you know, a couple different notes, clarifications, and a couple tempo things in some of the pieces. And just, I love hearing from him about some of his ideas about the works that we're playing. But I usually just, unless it's something that's totally impossible, I try to do it and leave it alone, you know, let the composer wanted it, I'll try to do it. You know, there are some, I was listening to that and like, he likes to write really high notes for the clarinet. So James, if you're listening, you know, be gentle in those super, super high notes for the clarinet. Okay. But,
well, he might be listening because I was writing to him and he said, is this going to be a written interview, a print interview, or is it all you're going to be online? I said, actually, it's going to be live, and here's where. So.
It's okay. You don't want a composer to write stuff that's too easy for you either. You're not challenged by it. So he's probably like, you can handle it. You can do it. So, but yeah, keep it low. Keep it low.
So I want to play another piece that we have, the one that you referred to of his, ad anew, which is Hebrew for how long, or literally until when. And this piece is based on a really interesting text. You want to talk about it, or shall I read the text?
Oh, yeah, you can talk about the text for sure. Yeah. Yeah, okay. Please do.
So this is based on a lament from the book of Habakkuk, or Habakkuk, however you choose to pronounce it. Apparently they're both correct. And he's one of the minor prophets in the Bible, one of the 12 minor prophets in the Old Testament. And the bit that it's based on reads, "This is the burden that Habakkuk the prophet received in a vision. How long, Lord, must I call for help, but you do not listen? Or cry out to you, violence, but you do not save? Why do you make me look at injustice? Why do you tolerate wrongdoing? Destruction and violence are before me. There is strife and conflict abounds. Therefore, the law is paralyzed and justice never prevails. The wicked hem in the righteous so that justice is perverted." This is a piece he wrote in 2015 for a recital with a fellow faculty member at Morgan State University. Some things never change. They're in the Bible and they're happening in the street today.
Yeah, what's really interesting about that is that I only read about that after I started playing the piece, after I got the music for it. And that it gives me chills a little bit because I discovered the piece in the heat of the summer last year in 2020 with all of its challenges regarding violence and injustice and everything else. and was feeling the same, if you will. We were all kind of feeling the same, and probably saying the same kind of prayers and having similar thoughts. And so it's really powerful. I think sometimes with music, sometimes pieces find you don't find them. And I feel like that kind of happened in this case.
His description of the piece says that there's sighing in both instruments that rises to try to have some sort of sense of hopefulness and to overcome obstacles. But as the music grows more intense, there's a sense that things have not really resolved. At the end, the lack of resolution lands on an open fifth and a long-held note, a sigh in the clarinet. Since he talks about the end, I thought we would listen to the last 3 minutes of Ad Anew, and the pianist is Anna Polonsky. Bravo. And just to be clear, when you're pedaling in that video, you're not doing a weird clarinet move. You're turning the page in your
Exactly. Yeah, turning the Bluetooth pedal with the iPad. Yeah.
So
oh gosh.
That's just gorgeous. What are, other than the high notes, and I gotta tell you that in the comments section, we have James Lee III saying, sure, I'll watch the high notes. So other than the high notes, what are his fingerprints, so to speak, on that?
So of course, after I say that, I'm listening to this and I'm thinking, it's so effective, like the pain and the strain and the piercing quality, emotional quality of the clarinet up there, and it does make it feel so much more impactful, and I really think he has, besides just the lovely kind of melodies, but the color of the notes that he chooses together, the collection of notes that he chooses to play that are so sensitive. It really is how he uses both instruments. And also, I really love how he allows the instruments to play alone at times. It gives it so much depth to have those solo moments of the piano and the sounds, and then the solo rich character of the clarinet in the shallow register, the low register too, and the pain and the struggle of the high red. He's very good at how should I say, calling out the spirit of the instruments, kind of
Great way to put it.
capturing what the expression and emotion is inside the instrument, that comes a little bit deeper, that brings you in as an audience member. It's a pleasure to listen to a work that I've played now quite a few times recently, and then to hear it played back and enjoy it so much more, and enjoy it like as much, if not more, as you get to know it. But even beyond that, it's just simply beautiful.
A lot of his music is inspired by the Bible. He's a Seventh-day Adventist, so that's important to him. And he also uses Hebrew in quite a few titles for some of his pieces. Adonai, Hebrew. He wrote a piece called, probably his best-known piece, Sukkot Through Orion's Nebula. And of course, you've got Chava's Daughters Speak coming up. Chava is Hebrew for Eve. So I wrote to him and I asked him why. And of course, he pointed out that the Seventh-day Adventists keep the same Sabbath as Jews, so no work from sundown Friday to sundown Saturday. And he also said he's been studying Hebrew since 2018, and that he sees a parallel between Black America and the ancient Israelite experiences of bondage. And he mentioned the same, that in spirituals, that imagery is also invoked, like the River Jordan and the boundary between slavery and freedom. I'm not sure what role religion plays in your life, but do the biblical connections inform your performance of his music?
That's really interesting. I mean, I think the more you hear about the spirit that went into, and the thought, the spirit of thought that went into a piece, the more it affects the performance for me. I'm sharing in the experience of like the creation of this work,
The one
as a as a performer. I feel like that's what we're doing kind of as performers, is sharing in that experience. We didn't compose all the notes, but by bringing it to life through the sound of the instrument, the clarinet in my case, we are participating in that experience. And so if I get to have a conversation with the composer, or know something about them, or read something about the composer if they're not alive, and I think it for me inspires the performance for sure. But I can also hear like the kind of soul of a sound in James's music, that I think that spirit comes through with composers, their spirit, their energy, if you will. And I think that can only, I'll speak for myself only, that only can inspire me to play it with a little bit more depth, to try to search for what the composer was perhaps experiencing and feeling about it. And that connection that you speak of is something that actually is spoken about a lot in Black churches all over America, oftentimes. So the experience of being a slave and how that relates to the stories that are in the Bible is something that and I, grew up going to church and different things, and having a little bit of that background. And that definitely informs a lot of, probably more than I know, about the way I play and the way I think about music and what music can do for one, as part of being something that is otherworldly or spiritual, if you will, or however you want to describe it. But music has that connection with me in a very visceral way, I think. And I don't need to know necessarily about the background of a piece to kind of feel what those energies are, but it's something that I love to know about when possible, because I think it, even if it's, even if I imagine it being something that I directly connect with, I like experimenting with that, in performance, but also in the way I think about what is music doing, where is it taking us. So, um, and is it taking us on a journey, and for some it might be spiritual, for others it might just be one of fulfillment, and in a way that is spiritual, in a way that sort of fulfillment that we often, lots of people get from music. um,
So what's the journey
yeah.
of the new piece? I'm sorry, I didn't mean to cut you off, but
No.
what is the journey of this new piece, Chava's Daughters Speak? As I said, Chava, Hebrew for Eve, the first woman.
Yeah, well, so we've only done it in parts, and we haven't actually all gotten together and done it
You haven't been
together.
in the same.
No,
Yeah.
no, not in the same space yet. But we will soon, in a couple days. And we've worked on it separately with Myra so far. And from what I can hear, I think first of all, I think people are gonna love it. Like, it has all of those characters that I love about James's music, the kind of beautifully tasteful sounds and melodies and harmonies that are put upon rhythms that are kind of unsettling at times and yet still stunningly beautiful. So I think it's going to be a great journey. There are a few different movements, and they're kind of very different and special in their own ways. But I look forward to our few long rehearsals on it in the next couple of weeks. So it's going to be really enjoyable.
Well, it's really cool. As I say, I've been corresponding for the last several days with James, and it's fascinating. These songs, he said he wanted to write about women in the Bible, especially women who didn't necessarily get a voice. And so he Googled and found a poet who had written about women in the Bible. She is neither Black nor Jewish. She is Sister Lou Ella Hickman, a nun with the Sisters of the Incarnate Word and Blessed Sacrament in Corpus Christi, Texas. And her poems are quite wonderful. They're these possible thoughts of biblical women who did not get a chance to speak. And I love the women that he chose.
Wow, that is amazing.
So the first one is After Eve, which is sort of, he said it's a prologue. The second one is Absalom's wife, Absalom being King David's son who rebelled, and before he was killed, he got his head caught in a tree, and that's sort of what his wife was thinking when she saw this. Then we have Abishag the Shunammite, who was a young woman who was sort of put into old King David's bed to keep him warm. And there's sort of, she didn't actually do anything with him, but her youth and beauty were supposed to sort of seep into his oldness and make him youthful again. And then we've got The Wife of Matthew, which this poem is, I find, hilarious, because she says, well, there was all this counting because he was the tax collector. The life was a series of endless numbers until we got to the follow him. And then that was it. Like once he met Jesus, that was like, okay, he's gone. I just love these. And then the fifth one is the woman bent with infirmity, who is a nameless woman who was healed by Jesus on the Sabbath, and he got grief from everybody for healing her on the Sabbath. And he went, well, what? You would help a dog or a horse who was, on the Sabbath if something was wrong. I'm not supposed to heal this woman. And the poetry is wonderful, and I cannot wait to hear what he's done with it. And I love the idea that he wanted to amplify, both he and Sister Lou Ella Hickman wanted to amplify voices that have been silenced or marginalized throughout history.
Yeah.
And it's actually fun because I just finished reading the book Veritas, which is about the fake gospel of Jesus's wife. But the reason that became a thing was because it was this Harvard scholar who desperately wanted to give women a voice in early Christianity. And so I find this all very interesting, of people wanting to give women voices where they haven't had them before.
Right.
I can't wait to hear it.
Yeah. I can't wait for you to hear it. I can't wait to hear it.
Right. I haven't had a chance to. So this is the third piece of James Lee III that you're premiering this year. Is it all intimidating to play the first performance of a piece?
No, I think it's amazing, because, sometimes when you walk out on stage, you feel like there are all these, anxieties about what you're thinking about it, how the performance is going to go, what they're going to think about it, all these issues. But when it's like the first time anyone has ever heard it, maybe including yourself, or performed in front of people, there's this feeling of freedom and exploration without those judgments and anxieties. It's like, this is the performance that is. It's not, going to be the final or quintessential performance or whatever, but because it's one of the first, it just is. And you are allowed to just put the music forth and try to search for it and find it yourself, and to present it in a way that feels authentic. And that's like what you dream of as a performer, is to play the music without all of the baggage of anxiety. And, as a performer,
right.
Like there's, I think, less of that when you're playing amazing new works.
So, as you have alluded to, and as nobody needs to say, but we'll say it anyway, this has obviously been an extraordinary year for all of us. It's affected you on the pandemic level, as a person, as a father, as a husband, as a musician, and it's also affected you as a Black American. And so I wanted to play the video rather than describe it. I want to play the video that you posted in reaction to George Floyd's murder last May. Thank you for that. And you started the hashtag Take Two Knees. Did you have any idea how huge that was going to become?
No, I didn't. Um, I was doing it because I was in pain, frankly, like so many people. And I didn't have an outlet to release a lot of that at the time, because concerts weren't going on, because we were isolated, for so long at that point already. And I was touched by all of the responses, and I watched every single video Take Two Knees tribute that everyone did. I
How many
sat
were
in
there?
front of my computer. There were hundreds and hundreds, and I saw every one. And for about a month there, I was staring at my computer every day, watching people around the world um, stand up for what's right, after me. But it was their own search for meaning, their own search um, for an ability or the urge to protest and to say something about injustice, and to just reach out to the community and say we're all here together in this. And that was really powerful. And it doesn't get easier. It doesn't get easier to watch that video. It doesn't get easier to watch the video which I took days to watch of George Floyd being murdered, for many, many minutes on end. And so that was from a place of pain. It was really inspiring for me to see people come from different walks of life, and to place that hashtag on their videos and with statements as well, saying, and that was the really powerful thing. It was often, the videos weren't just music videos. They were often accompanied by people saying, we believe that Black Lives Matter. People saying that we believe that this kind of violence and injustice needs to stop, that we care about Black lives too, and we care about humanity.
After I saw that, I emailed everybody I could think of at NPR to say, interview this man. And when they finally did interview you, I loved, you said, America has given me more opportunity and more gifts than any place I could ever imagine living. And yet the melody can go off, and we need to acknowledge that we can hear it. We can't pretend like it hasn't turned to something darker. And I have to say, as the daughter of Holocaust survivors, that really resonated with me.
Yeah, one of the things that I might have mentioned this in some interview somewhere, I'm not sure, but one of the great speeches I ever heard was of Elie Wiesel getting at the Justice Awards down the street at John Jay College one year. And he spoke about silence. And he spoke about why silence is so deadly. And he spoke about how if there was something that he would have wished, he would have wished that people would have said something. Good people would have said something. And so many didn't. And so many of us don't. And it's something that we always must remember, because it's so easy not to. It's so easy to think, oh, it's those people over there. It's those people that aren't our neighbors, those people that look different or act different or have different traditions. And yet, so we forget that they're human. We frankly forget that they're human. And I think that's something that, as people, as humans, people that care about others, we care about our families, our close loved ones, our friends. But do we care about those that we may not know? Do we care about those that are across the country somewhere being harmed? Do we care about those around the world that are being harmed? And that's something that is greater than oneself. And it's hard to do for us humans and for all of us, because the status quo is very easy to do. It's easy to just kind of look the other way in the bad way and not to speak up and ever say anything and just kind of go about our business and go to work and do our thing and try to succeed. And yet it's moments like this where the world needs us to, all of us, to like say, actually, no, that is not okay. Like, I'm not okay with that. And if more people do that, then we hopefully save a couple lives here and there, you know?
You mentioned, sort of in passing there, the John Jay thing. Your activism did not start last year, because in 2016 you were awarded the John Jay Medal for Justice for working with young musicians of color and for working with juveniles in prison, so that they would have something better to look forward to once they got out of prison. I got to ask, how did it feel to get that award alongside Gloria Steinem and Brian Stevenson, who founded the Equal Justice Initiative?
Well, just to check, I think I probably performed for some youth at a prison once, but I don't think that's what they were considering for that mission. I think I was alongside. So, but to mention it, at the time, I felt, as I do now, that those people are the heroes that are doing that work. They dedicate their entire existence, their entire life to changing the world in that way. And at the time I felt, okay, I'm a musician, I'm trying to do good work. You know, I believe in reaching kids in the next generation and spreading the word of
which
that.
you're doing through Juilliard.
Yeah, the Juilliard Music Advancement Program now. But it was interesting that I feel like the situation being around those people and being allowed to be in the space, you know, I met John Lewis backstage at the Justice Awards. I met James Earl Jones back there, Jesse Norman, you know, these people, and being in their spirit, you realize that these are the people that are true justice heroes. They dedicate their lives to this. And so in a way, my tiny little expression last summer pales in comparison to people that dedicate and risk their lives and dedicate their whole lives to these issues. But does that mean that we all shouldn't find a way that we can try to impact our little worlds more, and that we shouldn't all try to do our little bit part, however little or big that we think it is? I think that's what I kind of learned from those situations. I talked to people at the time and I said, why am I getting this award? And people told me, you are getting this award because of this, this, and this, and this. And you will find a way to do your part if you haven't already, which you have. And that's something that's inspiring.
And they were right.
It's inspiring that, you know, those people like have those moments where they might believe in you and make you believe in yourself. I'll just throw another detail in. Last year, at the beginning of the year, I met for the second time Clarence Jones, who was Dr. King's lawyer and speechwriter and a former clarinet player. And
that's cool.
He came to my concert years ago, but when we met and spent some time at Juilliard, we gave him an award at Juilliard, and he put his arm around me after I played and was talking about my embouchure, but talking about how proud he was of me. I felt such a connection with all of those people that came before that were musicians. You know, all of the great speakers, they were all artists and musicians and speakers and preachers and dancers. And it's a powerful thing, that tradition.
So speaking of people who came before and they're still with us, I am in awe of your parents. They were artists with that raising you. They were artists with what we artists call jobs, teaching, school, then in the fire department. And they encouraged you and your brother Damari to follow your dreams and go out there and do it. I got to say, my father was a composer and my parents discouraged me from going into music. So I am in awe of your parents.
Me too. I think they're great. We we got my brother and I. We are very, very, very lucky, and they wow, I owe them so much. I mean, they're so wonderful, and you've met them, and they're lovable people, and they just tried to do the right thing by us and gave up their everything for us.
And is there another clarinetist in the house now?
That's funny. Not yet, but I was practicing today, and my daughter comes up with the recorder. We have a little recorder in the house, and she just starts tooting one note, just tooting while I'm practicing, and she always does it. But it's so wonderful. I was like, you eventually you're gonna learn some notes to play. Put your fingers down. She's like, oh, okay, I guess.
So you work with what is the Juilliard Music Advancement Program involve with the kids you work with?
Yeah, so I'm the artistic director of the program. And so we basically have about 70 kids that meet on Saturdays. And this year we've been online and started doing half some of them in person a little bit later in the year. But they get a conservatory style education. So they're like taking, like Juilliard courses, at a young age, intermediate to advanced students, and they get theory, ear training, ensembles, chamber music, chorus, all of these things. But they also get like community building. They get an artist as citizen project where they have to kind of do projects and teach. One of my students is teaching a young group of budding musicians, and she's 15. It's amazing. And some of them play music, of course, during normal times. They were going to nursing homes, and they have to come up with the ideas for these projects, and they have to think of themselves and outside of just their musical community, but how they can kind of change the world and be great citizens of the world. And so I'm really, really proud of the work that we do there, along with the Dean Weston Sprott and our great team, Rebecca Reuter and Mason Kincaid. And it's awesome. It's given me so much hope this year.
These kids, they can see you and the other principal brothers in orchestras, but it's also important to hear people you can relate to hear their music in concerts, people like James Lee III. It was really interesting. Last fall, I redid my month of Classics for Kids shows about William Grant Still, which I first wrote 20 years ago. And when we were dependent on recording companies for the music that could be used in them. And now I suddenly discovered, thanks to the internet, I can put all kinds of more people in them than I couldn't. Same thing with women composers. And I wrote them just before you came out with that gorgeous Samuel Coleridge Taylor clarinet quintet. Oh my God, what a piece. What other underplayed works by composers of color do you recommend? For classics, for anybody.
Oh gosh. So there's the whole library of Adolphus Hailstork. I mean, just the entire library of his work. I'm sitting there around the house just this past year listening to some piece, and I'm like, that is gorgeous. What is that? It's like Hailstork, string, I think a string orchestra work. And anyway, it's just beautiful. And there are many more. There's the Florence Price Concerto that everyone is just like raving over. And there's the whole, there's the entire album, that Catalyst album, the Catalyst Quartet, and I did this album, Uncovered. And basically everything on there and their future albums is something that everyone should listen to, basically. But it's amazing how we don't know enough. I could sit here and say, oh yeah, I could name these composers and everything. But even if I did that, I still don't know nearly enough. You know, Dawson, the composers, the list goes on, but the amount of repertoire there is way above where I am currently. And so I'm just encouraging everyone to keep
Including
discovering. Yeah.
Quetzal's apparently also interested in your. Well, speaking of recordings, as if everything you're doing this year, and it must be exhausting being the spokes clarinetist. I can't imagine when you ever have time to sleep or see your family. You've got a recording coming out this year. What's on that recording? Yet another recording.
Which one? Which one are you talking?
With Gloria.
Oh yeah, sure. So yeah, there are a couple different projects.
I only read about one that's coming out in November. What else?
Yeah, I have to. Well, those are works in progress. Those are early stages. But yeah, I have a entire Brahms and Weber album coming out. Yeah, Brahms clarinet sonatas, and you heard it here first, and Weber Grand Duo Concertant. And this was a life dream of mine, you know, to be able to do these works. These are works that as a young clarinetist, you only dream of playing, let alone recording commercially. So last year, Gloria called me up and she was like, we need to do this. And I was like, you're right. When are we ever going to get another chance, another moment where we can both be free at the same time, in the same place, and do it? And, you know, we both discussed, we were like, this is a very traditional album, right? But what does that mean? And it took a while. I was thinking about it. I was like, should we do this album? And I had a conversation with a young Black clarinetist from Florida that I met years ago. And we were on a meeting somewhere. And I told him about my thoughts and my concerns. And I love these pieces. All clarinetists love these pieces. He was like, oh, you need to do that. Definitely. You know why? Because all of the young Black clarinetists in the country are working on these pieces, and they need to know that they need to hear you playing them to inspire them to continue doing what they're doing, to continue. If they're the only kid in their youth orchestra that's playing music that happens to be Black, if they're the only person in their high school that's playing music that happens to be Black, if people tell them they shouldn't be playing this music because they are Black, they need to, which happens, they need to see you playing this. And I was like, you're right. And so I'm really happy that my partner Gloria and I are did this. I believe it's going to be an amazing recording, and that people are going to be able to hear it. So I'm excited about it. Well,
Anthony McGill, thank you so much for continuing to inspire all of us and for being on Inside the Concert from 92Y School of Music. Tuesday, May 11th is the date for Anthony's performance with soprano Susanna Phillips and pianist Myra Huang. That's part of 92Y's Almost Home series, so you can attend that concert live in the hall. It will also be streamed online at 7:30 p.m. Eastern on May 11th, and it will stay online for a week after that. There's information about tickets at 92y.org. Thank you, Anthony.
Thanks.
On May 13th on Inside the Concert, my guest will be pianist Stuart Goodyear. Thank you all for being here this evening and for your comments, James Lee III. As always, 92Y is deeply grateful for your contributions, which make all their programming possible. Good night.